and welcome to another video in my P5JS tutorial workshop series. And I once again apologize for the amateur quality of this recording because I don't have a crew yet, so I'm forced to do this selfie recording, which I don't like, but it is what it is, and until I can get a team or something to help me out. Now, in this video, this is going to be the third video in the series. I'm going to give you an introduction to P5JS, and we'll be using something called as a Perlin noise in order to help you understand this introduction. Now, Perlin noise, it sounds cool, but at its core, essentially what it is like you're walking down a street, and at every intersection, you randomly decide if you will take a left or right or back or front, and then you go to the next intersection, and then you randomly decide if you'll take a left or right or front or back. So that is essentially what Perlin noise is. It does have a cool name, and it is an interesting concept because it demonstrates something called as, randomness. Okay, that's what Perlin noise is all about. So in this P5JS code and illustration and everything, what I'll try to do is I will try to explain to you the basic Perlin noise, where it's just a dot walking across, but also I made some of my own improvements, of course. None of this code is mine. I took it from the free textbook on the P5JS website. I think this guy, he has a textbook called Nature of Code. That is where I got most of my learnings from when I was learning P5JS. So that is what this video is going to be. Once again, sorry about the amateur quality of this video. Hopefully, as time goes by, I'll get better at this and the quality will improve. But the code, the explanation itself should be fine because I am a professional tutor and I've been doing this for like 10 years and so on. So hopefully you learn something. Thank you. So normally I try to record the video first and then I try to do a voiceover as the video is playing. But today I'm discussing code, so I believe what I'm doing is I'm gonna go ahead and directly do the code and also speaking at the same time. So I think I'll have to do a combination of this. Sometimes I will do like a voiceover. Other times I will go ahead and do a live recording as I am coding on the computer. Now, first thing first, hopefully you are coming here from chapter 1 and 2 where I show you where the code is and everything. As usual, the description has the links and everything. But now I'm gonna go directly into the folder here. So I will ask you to start with this one. There's a project called as Introduction Random Walks. Now that's the Perlin noise thing I mentioned earlier in the video. So let's go ahead and get that. So as always, open the folder from the P5JS workshop, and then let's go ahead and open that in VS Code. Very important with that. Okay, there it is. And what I want to do is I want to put this on the left side so I can get the output on the right side. I have the live server, and there it is. And there we go. Now what you'll see here is, first let me there you go. That's what Perlin noise is. So you'll see that there's like a random dot, and it moves every step. Imagine like it's walking at a step, and every step it tries to go in a different direction, north, south, east, west, or if you want, you can think of it as left, right, top and bottom, whichever direction makes more sense to you. So that is what is happening here. That is Perlin noise. Now the original code is borrowed from this website called Nature of Code. It's a very good textbook / website because the textbook is available for free, so you can just read it online completely. This is where I got the idea for this code from. I essentially borrowed the code from this guy, Daniel Schiffman. You should definitely follow him on GitHub and stuff like that. And and here you have the random walk. That's the very first chapter, really. And there's a very detailed explanation here how it works and everything. So this is what we are trying to understand today. But first, I want to go into a little bit of explanation about how P5JS works. Okay, So for that, let me go ahead and get the Paint software for you, and also let me open up the PowerPoint thing, right? So hold on, let me do that. Let's see. Okay, here we go. Twitch sessions. Okay, there we go. All right. Now previously I was hoping to do these classes like live Twitch sessions, but that didn't work out. So now I'm started recording the classes offline and then uploading it on video. So now then, so P5JS, how does it work? That is the main question. Now there are a few things you need to know here already. Now when you talk about movies or TV show or video games or any kind of motion or movement, we talk about frames per second. Okay, now if you are new to P5JS and you're also new to the concept of animation, then I don't know how well I'll be able to explain this to you. So hopefully you're trying to do animation with P5JS and you already know what animation is and how it works and everything. But I'll still give a small introduction by using the Paint software. So imagine that you have a canvas. I'm just using the Paint software from Windows. And I'll take this pencil here and I'll take a red circle. And I think I'm just going to select this brush. Okay. So let's imagine like this is one frame. The eraser is there. Okay. So I'm drawing a circle here. All right. And that is frame number 1. So now all this happens really fast in animation. So every second can have 24 frames in the case of a movie, or 48 frames in case of a TV show, or 60 frames in kind of in case of P5JS. or video games. Like if you're playing video games, if I play Fortnite, where my computer tries to gives me 60 frames per second. So what does that mean really? So every frame, what happens in an animation, any kind of animation, movies, TV show, video games, P5JS, every second is broken up into so many frames. In P5JS, every second is broken up into 60 frames. So which means every second, now imagine that, every second what happens is, let me see if I can get a bigger size of razor. Hold on. Okay, so every second what happens is the P5JS canvas, okay, every second P5JS will try to draw, say, a circle, and then it erases it, and then it draws again. And this happens 60 times every second. All right. Now the human eye, as I mentioned before, you should already have some knowledge about animation. The human eye cannot differentiate when something happens really fast. Okay. Now when you're watching a movie at the cinemas, you are actually seeing 24 still images every second. But because it is happening so fast and it's happening within a second, it looks like the people on the movie screen are moving. That is how animation is created, or movies are created, or everything any kind of entertainment really is all about frames. So P5JS is essentially a digital painter who will paint whatever you code to paint, and it'll try to paint 60 times every second. I mean, if your computer is really slow or old, or you're doing too much, then yes, it may not be able to hit 60 frames per second. But under ideal conditions, P5JS will paint and wipe the canvas 60 times every second. So if you've written a code so that every frame you draw a circle which is moving 1 pixel. Pixel is a unit on screen. Pixels, again, I hope you look it up on the internet and so on. So if you have written a code saying that you draw a circle and then you are moving it 1 pixel every frame, okay, P5JS will draw the circle, then wipe it, draw it in the new location, wipe it, draw it in the new location, wipe it,
draw it in a new location, wipe it, draw it in the new location, and wipe it. So when it does this really fast, 60 times per second, and it keeps going till you end the animation, it appears as if the ball is going to the right or down or left or up or right or and so on and so forth. So that is the core concept of animation, and that is also the core concept in P5.js. So you should think of P5.js as some kind of a friend. Think of P5.js as some kind of a painter. Okay, so it's like when you're getting your house painted. You tell the painter, like, hey man, paint on the left wall, paint on the right wall. Left wall should be red color, right wall should be on the blue color. You give instructions to the painter, and the painter will do whatever you say. Similarly, imagine that P5.js is your painter, and the P5.js also gives you a canvas, and then you use programming, computer programming, math, physics. And I'm mentioning all this because if you want to become really good in P5.js and do some really cool stuff, then yes, you need to know programming. You also need to know math, and you also need to know a little bit of physics. So P5.js essentially allows you to imagine a way to paint stuff using programming and knowledge of math and physics. Okay, and you tell P5.js, like, in the paint, you are like, hold on, let me just go ahead and so you essentially imagine this is the P5.js canvas, and you literally tell P5.js that you need a circle of this size, and P5.js will draw it for you. Now, circle, of course, to draw the circle, you need programming, that is JavaScript. But the circle has something called as a radius. It has something called as a diameter, and which means every pixel here, which is what is visible when you finish drawing it, every pixel here can be calculated using some sort of mathematical formula that you probably learned when you were in high school or something like that. So essentially what you do is you use a combination of computer programming, knowledge about mathematics, knowledge about physics, or whatever else that helps you to calculate the pixels that you want to draw on the screen. So all you do is, first step, you use your math knowledge, physics knowledge, and calculate the pixel values. That is the first step. So I'm going to just put it down on the PowerPoint here. Let me create another slide. So essentially what you do is, step number one, you calculate the pixel location using math and physics. And then step two, you send these pixels to the P5.js painter. And then after that, P5.js will go ahead and paint it on the screen 60 times every second. Now it's up to you if you want to send these new pixels every frame, 60 times a second, or you can send it once a second, you can send it once 10 seconds. Now that is where your programming knowledge comes into picture. Now for smooth animation, of course, when you talk about video games and things like that, I'm sure you may have read about it, or you can ask somebody who plays video games. They will tell you that 60 frames per second is like the sweet spot for any kind of digital animation, whether it is video games or P5.js animation or regular animation and stuff like that. So P5.js tries to allow you to send and receive these pixels 60 times per second. Now, as I mentioned, if you are trying to do too much in a single frame, then P5.js may not be able to hit that target because your computer cannot handle it. Eventually, maybe in one of these videos or maybe in a blog post, I will talk about how P5.js is very resource intensive. You need a good computer to be able to do complex animations, right? Just like a video game. If you're playing video game at a low settings, then obviously you can do that on a basic computer with a basic GPU. But if you want to play at 1080p or 2K or 4K with ultra settings and ray tracing and all, you probably need like a RTX 3090 or something like that. So same policy here. You want to do simple stuff, you can do it on your computer, tablet, iPad, mobile phone, whatnot. But if you want to do something complex, then you will need a complex computer. So that is essentially how P5.js works. Now let's look at the code which we will try, which is running this project. So I have the animation here, it's still running, I'm sure. There it is, it's still going. So now that you know some idea about how P5.js works, perhaps now you can try to relate with it. So what is happening is every second, okay, now you'll notice that the dot is not moving one item a second. It's actually moving, I believe, multiple times within a second. All right, I don't know if the recording can pick it up. So what is happening is every second, 60 times, the P5.js is being provided with new coordinates for it to paint, and it paints. Okay, and what I've done is, instead of erasing the previous painting, I'm keeping the new paint, older paints as well. That is why you can see that the dot leaves behind like a footprint. Okay, so that is intentional, of course. So I want to see the footprint because I like this Perlin noise. When you leave it running for like half an hour or 1 hour, the entire screen is filled with all kind of colorful dots, and the best part is every time you run it, it is a different unique artwork. So although Perlin noise is very, very simple, a lot of times, for example, if I go to my LinkedIn account, you'll notice that I'm using the Perlin noise thing as my backdrop. You can see it here. I'm using that as my backdrop. I have my blogs. I think I have my, podcast, for example. Hold on. And even in the podcast, I am using, let me just show you rather than just tell you. See, there it is. Again, I use the P5.js artwork generated in my podcast. So wherever I can, whenever I need something that is nice and easy and simple, I try to use P5.js, especially the Perlin noise random walking thing. So it's very interesting, and it's also very simple for you to start practicing as a P5.js student. Okay, now this is where I think I'm going to take a short break and resume the recording later. So what I'll do next is I'll start by explaining the code, what these files do, what this is, and how everything works. That is coming up next. Thank you. Okay, let's resume with the next part of this tutorial. So here I want to start by explaining the P5.js coding structure, the files, the libraries, and things like that. The first thing you'll notice is, oh yes, so if you're gonna practice P5.js, I strongly recommend you use one of my folders. Okay, let me just tell you now, what I tell my students is I always ask them to use this P5.js starter animation earth with many moons as a starting template whenever you're doing P5.js. All of my projects follow the template, so any of these folders you can use, but I personally prefer recommend that you use the P5.js starter animation earth with many moons as the starting template. Okay, so which means if you use my template, then it will make sense with my tutorials, of course. So hopefully you will take that advice. Right then, so let's come back to the code here and let's put the animation again on the right side. Let me make sure that I've toggled word wrap. Okay, all right, so now there it is. Now my assumption is, if you're trying to do P5.js, you're probably coming from an artistic background or probably part of some art school. So all of this might seem very overwhelming at first, but once you do this, it's not that difficult. Once you do this for a few days or a week, on and off, on and off. You'll get used to it. Okay, and it is worth it. So it is worth it. Nothing is easy in life, of course. So there you go. So first thing is, in P5.js, you'll notice that we do have something called as the basic index.html. Okay, in web development, HTML, CSS, JavaScript, we always have a file called index.html, which is the entry point. If you imagine your animation as a house, okay, the index.html is the door through which you enter the house. Okay, and then this house has all these things which are arranged. So this is the entry point. From here, things start diverging or staying same. It depends on your programming. So first step is you have the index.html. Nothing fancy is going on here. You can literally just copy paste this file as it is. Even if you don't understand a single bit about that, that's okay, because you are an art student. Okay, you're not trying to be like this hardcore programmer. If you are, that's great. Programming is a lucrative career. Personally, I'm going to watch for that because my life is built around programming. But even if you're not trying to be a programmer, basic sense, whenever you're working on a project, either you use my template or you just copy paste this file, even if none of it actually makes any sense to you. But still, this is the standard HTML tags. You'll get used to it. That again, I also don't care what it is, just put it there. Every HTML file will have a meta tag, meta name. Now these things are actually very important. These things decide what is the scale of the drawing and things like that. Leave it as it is, don't change them. Finally, if you want to give a title, the title comes here. So if you want to change the title, you can do it like this. If I want to make it Perlin noise, so there you go, the title changes. See, that's what the title is all about. Then this is the body and padding. I think this decides if your animation is full screen or not full screen. Let me try to change it, see what happens. I think it doesn't matter. So there you go. I changed the padding, nothing happened. Yeah, nothing. No, I guess that won't matter. So I'm gonna put it back to 0 how it was. Now there is a style.css, that is the style sheet. Okay, now that file is here. Let's look into it. And here I think this is again decides how big or small things are. Let me make it, see if it, there you go. That's what it does. It decides the height. If I make it 50, there you go, that decides the height of the canvas. We'll put it back to 100 so we take up the entire space. Right, there we go. Okay, whenever I'm explaining to you, you'll notice that I will click on the reload every now and then, because the canvas is dependent on the window size of your browser window. If the browser window changes, the canvas doesn't immediately automatically adjust itself. So I just hit reload so that it adjusts itself. Okay, that's why I keep doing it. So there you go, I'm gonna adjust it again. And then flex is a CSS thing which allows you to center things. Again, this is CSS centering things. Again, this is for centering things. So all these things, if you can understand, if you want to manipulate, you can do it, but I would recommend leave it as it is. It's okay. You don't need to learn CSS or anything like that. Okay, all right then. So you don't really need to understand CSS to do P5.js specifically. So if you want, once again, just copy paste these things as usual. The ultimate goal is to make sure that the painting takes up the entire screen. That's what all of this is doing. Okay, so next thing, let's come back here. So that's the style sheet. Okay, and then finally this is the key part, line number 16. This is the P5.js library. It will be interesting and useful for you if you visit the P5.js website. Okay, you'll notice that P5.js is in fact a JavaScript version of the processing library. So there is actually a library called processing. See, there you go. So this library processing is the one which actually started this, and P5.js is the JavaScript version of the main processing library. So if you are getting deep into creative coding and P5.js and stuff like that, and you want to go like completely deep into it, and of course you have to learn Java. Don't forget, P processing uses Java. So if you want to do that, then yes, processing is where it all started. But I am going to stick to P5.js because although I am aware of Java, I can work on Java and things like that, I find the flexibility offered by P5.js far more practical. So yeah, but there is something called processing, which is where this comes from. Okay, but yes, so you have the main P5.js website. I would recommend you visit there often, especially the reference section, which has all the functions, everything you need in a single place. Very, very useful. I find myself coming here anytime I'm working on a new project or teaching something new to a student. So that is the P5.js library. Now here what I've done is I've downloaded a copy of it for local use. And some people, what they do is they use the P5.js library, from the web version and things like that. You don't have to worry about it. It's okay. I don't mind. It's easier to just use a local library, but you can find the online version somewhere. I'm sure it is there somewhere. But I'm happy with the local version. It's fine. It's not a big problem. Now, next thing is I have these 3 files. Okay. Out of this, the main file is sketch.js. That is the file where the setup and the draw function. Okay, remember how I told you that index.html is your entry point into a website. If the website was a house, index.html is the entry point. So for P5.js, for this P5.js painting, remember I told you how P5.js is like painter. P5.js is the painter, and it provides the canvas, and you instruct the painter what to paint using programming, math, and physics. So all that happens, or at least begins, in this file called sketch.js. So imagine that index.html is the entry point into the house, which is the website, and sketch.js is the entry point to the P5.js area inside the house. So that is like the entry point for the canvas. And from there, I can create as many additional script files as required, and I'll be explaining them as well as this tutorial progresses. So that is in a nutshell the basic structure of your index.html file, the CSS file, the P5.js library. Now there is a library called p5.sound.js. I'm not really using it. I haven't used it in any project till now, but I understand that it can be used for all kind of creative sound generation. P5.js is for creative art generation, and P5.sound.js can be used for creative sound generation. So that's what that file is, although I don't use it in any of my projects. You'll notice that I haven't linked it anywhere here. In fact, I have uncommented it, because if you don't need a specific file, you should not be loading it, okay, for the sake of efficiency and optimization. And that's it. That's all there is to it with the index.html file. And now we can jump right in to the sketch.js and try to understand how sketch.js actually helps the drawing happen. Okay, so that's what we will do. Alright then, so now we are in the sketch.js file, which is where the majority of P5.js animation takes place. Okay, now I want to add it. Alright folks, looks like when I was recording this specific section of the tutorial, the audio was, it got disconnected. So I'm doing a voiceover. So what I'm trying to show here is I'm trying to show you that yes, if you really want to, you can go ahead and use the online P5.js editor to run the code that I'm sharing with you, and also any code you might find online. I've noticed that a lot of art students, they find it convenient to use the online P5.js editor because the whole development environment is set for you, so you can just go to the website and start running code and see the results and things like that. which is perfectly welcome. However, you have to understand that if you're really serious about P5.js, it is always better to run the code directly on your computer and not in the online editor. Personally, as a programmer myself, I prefer to do the whole thing locally, and then when I have to showcase this to someone, copy pasting the code from my local computer to the online editor. That is the ideal way to do things. Practice, learn on your local machine with VS Code, live editor, and so on. And then when everything is ready, then take the code. One thing I'm trying to point out is you will notice that I'm using multiple files in my project. Now in the P5.js editor, I understand there is an option to include multiple files, but what I do normally is I simply copy paste the code from all the files into that one editor page, sketch.js. So if you want to run my code in the online P5.js editor, then it makes sense that you go ahead and copy the entire code into the P5.js editor. So there you go. That's what I was trying to explain there. Once again, I can't believe that the audio recording skipped when I was actually explaining this. So now I'm doing like a voiceover. So that's what there is. All right, then. So now I'm trying to explain the code then. So first step, I'm going to show here that you have the sketch.js file. Okay. The main thing in P5.js is you have the setup function and the draw function. The setup function is where you try and set everything up, whereas the draw function is where you actually do the animation. The first thing you do in the setup function, of course, is the background color. Okay, you can see that I have like a pinkish kind of a background color. That is my mom's favorite color. So that is why I chose that color. All right. And now I believe I'm going to change the color just to show you how it works. There it is. I changed it to 20, and now the background color has changed to 20, and the animation is still going on. And now the next function we use in the setup function is to create the canvas. One thing you'll notice me doing in this tutorial video and in all of my tutorial videos, especially with P5.js, is I'll keep jumping from line to line and file to file because a lot of these things are not linear. Okay, so as and when something is connected, I'll immediately jump to something else. Like I started with background color, but now first I discussed background color, and now I'm talking about the canvas, and now I've switched over to the other files which I'm using, like the walker file and the global variables. Okay, so here you'll notice the reason why I do this is because in programming it is always a good idea that you keep your code separated, with each file serving a specific purpose. So here I have the walker file which has all the code related to the walker object. And here I'm trying to point out the variables. So you'll notice that in P5.js, a lot of variables are created by you. For example, this entire page, global variables, is about the variables I am using in this project. However, there are also variables like window width and window height, which are not variables that I created. They're actually variables that are directly given to you by P5.js. Now, of course, please understand that when you are creating your own variables, try to avoid creating variables which have the same name as the built-in variables. Please don't do that. Okay? And you'll also notice that I have initialized a lot of other values, but I'm not going to discuss that right away. I'll discuss them later when we reach that point. So let's go ahead and understand what this walker object does. Now you'll notice that I'm using a class called walker, and it is not unnatural to use the same name for both the object and the class. It is actually allowed in JavaScript. You can in fact use the same name as well. Okay. Now the walker class is in a separate file called walker.js, and you'll see right at the top I have the constructor. Okay, and it also has a function called render, and it has a function called the step. Now the constructor obviously is useful for initializing the values, and you'll notice that when I call and create this object, it is an empty constructor, which means it doesn't have any parameters as such, and all it does is it has two values, x and y, which are being assigned the width divided by 2 and height divided by 2. Now why did I set it that way? Now the reason is, in P5.js, the coordinate system starts from the top left corner. Okay, so the top left corner is the 0 for x and the 0 for y. And how it works is, the right direction, the direction I'm showing, is for the positive value for x, and the downward direction is the positive value for y. Now this is a little bit confusing because normally, when you are doing, I don't know if this still happens in other countries, but in India, we used to do these graph sheets where, basic graph, you'll know that up of x is positive, and right and up is positive y, and right is positive x. So here again, right is positive x, but the y positive is reversed. So that is why I want to make sure that this walker drawing animation begins from the center. So I'm doing width by 2 and height by 2. So when I restart the animation, you will notice that it starts exactly in the center because of the width by 2 and height by 2. And I believe now what I'll do is I'll go ahead and try to manipulate these values just to show you how the coordinate system works. Oh my God, I'm really upset that the recording did not happen. I mean, I went into so much detail and it was so natural, but now I'm doing a voiceover. Sorry about this, folks. My sincere apologies. So right then, so now I'm trying to change x to 10. So now the animation will start from the left side of the page because x is now 10. Remember, x is the top left corner 0, but y is still in the center because y remains height divided by 2. So there you go. I'm just trying to show you that because height is still set to half of the height, the animation starts in the center for y, but it is set to the beginning of x, so it's on the left side. Now I'm trying to change the height as well. I'm gonna make it 10, and now the animation will start on the top left corner. There it is. So this is an easy way for you to understand the P5.js coordinate system. This is very important because whenever you do any animation, remember, it's ultimately at the end of the day, P5.js is all about deciding where the pixels will be painted. So if you can't figure out or imagine where the pixel is supposed to come, where the pixel is supposed to start, where the pixels are supposed to end, then it'll be difficult for you to do P5.js, maybe even impossible. So right then, so now what I've done is I put the x and y back to how it was, width by 2, height by 2, and I believe I explained this before as well. P5.js is all about step 1, calculating the pixels, and step 2, showing the animation on the screen. And for that purpose, in this class, I've given 2 functions. There is the step function on line number 37, and then there is the render function on line number 7. Now, the render function is what really draws the things on the screen. So if that wasn't there, then the painting would simply not happen. And I believe that's what I'm going to do now. I'll go ahead and comment out the render function, or rather the function will remain as it is, but the code itself will be commented. So that's what's going to happen in a minute. So let's wait for it. And once again, my apologies, my friends. I'm still learning this whole video recording, video editing thing. So I didn't realize the recording cable had come off. So now I'm forced to do a voiceover to a video only. But I remember it was much more natural when I was speaking when I was recording, but the recording did not happen. Sorry about that. Nevertheless, all these videos, this is just like practice for me. I'm still learning this whole recording and video editing thing, so I'm sure these mistakes will keep happening, and I will learn from these mistakes. And there it is. I've commented that code, so you can see now the canvas is completely empty. It doesn't mean all those math calculations are not happening. It simply means that step number 1, calculating the pixel values, is still happening in this function, but the actual painting is not happening. So I'm just showing you the steps again. P5.js ultimately is calculate the pixels. Second step, show the pixels. So calculation is still happening in the step function. I haven't commented that. But the showing of the pixels is no longer happening because that code has been commented. Now, for those who are new to programming, commenting is a way for you to hide a code without actually deleting it. On Windows, you can do Control/. On Mac, you can do Command/. Okay, so now that I've uncommented it, the animation is back again. So now that I've shown you where the drawing comes from, I'm trying to explain what is going on, what is exactly happening in that code. The first step is I'm trying to use a random function to decide on a number. Now, why would I do that? Let me explain that with a drawing here. So now the whole point of Perlin noise is to decide, you're standing there, that's you, that's the person walking, and the person has to decide, will the person go north, will the person go east, will the person go south, will the person go, west. I think I reversed that, sorry. So 4 directions, so north, east, west, and south, okay? So now what I want is, I have 4 directions, so I simply need a random number, which is 0 or 1 or 2 or 3. That's what I'm trying to do there. So I'm using this function called random, which is given by P5.js, and I believe floor is another function either given by JavaScript or it's given by P5.js. Either way, I'm using a combination of the floor function and the random function so that I get a random value between 0, 1, 2, 3, which is north, east, west, and south. So that is what is happening in line number 18. So 4 directions, 4 numbers. And now I'm using a simple programming concept called as if-else to decide which direction the person will go. So it's like if the random number is 0, I go in one direction. If it's not 0 but 1, then I go in another direction. If it's not 1 but 2, then I go in another direction. If it's not 2 but 3, again I go in another direction. So if else, if else, if else. One of the most basic programming things we do, which is if else. So check the value and go in that direction. Check the value, go in that direction. That's all I'm trying to do. So 0 in the code means go in the plus direction for x. So I'm just trying to imagine the coordinates there. So x is right side, so x plus. So 0 means x plus. So there you go, x minus. So 1 is x minus. I'm drawing the P5JS coordinates one more time just to make it clear, because it doesn't follow the conventional x and y directions. It follows a slightly different way of showing things. So y down is actually positive, whereas x remains the same, just like the math graph that you may have used, but y direction down is positive and up is negative. So now if the value of 2, random number is 2, that's y plus, which means the pixels are going down. And obviously the last value 3, it means the pixels are going up. So those are the 4 values. 0, 1, that is for x plus and x minus. And then 2 and 3, that is for y plus and y minus. Finally, I'm using this function called constraint. I think I'm now going to the P5JS reference website or something. Now what I'm trying to, you'll notice that in the animation, it never crosses over outside the border. I have to make sure that whenever the guy hits a roadblock, like a wall or something, the direction should change to the opposite direction. So that is happening in line number 32 and 33. So there's this function called constraint. I understand it is a function given by P5JS. Just like those variables, P5JS has a number of functions that are given to you from the P5JS library. So I'm using the constraint function to limit where the guy can walk. In fact, if you want to know more about it, you should and you can visit the reference website of P5JS. There you go. Constraint is a function given to you by P5JS. Now, I spend a lot of time on the reference section of the website, because when you're working on a project or teaching a student or something, you can't remember everything. So you'll also find going to that link specifically to get an understanding of all the different facilities available to you. So that's what the reference page is all about. So now that we know how the drawing is happening and where the calculation is happening, let's look at all these other things that I'm doing. So I have all these other values that I'm using, okay? And what do they do? You have all these variables in the top. We'll come to that though. We'll come to that because now we are done with the setup, because setup is where we created a new walker object. And now I believe the code will move on to the draw function. Now in the draw function, once again, please remember that P5JS is all about pixels, calculation, and then finally showing the pixels. So these are the two steps we need to take care of. So if we go back to the draw function, which is where we do the actual drawing every frame every second, so it's like 60 frames per second. That is where the draw function happens. It gets called 60 times every second. There's the first step, walk us a step. That's where the pixels are being calculated. There you go. And second step is the actual drawing, which is happening from the render function. That's it. Those are the only two steps you need to make the random Perlin noise animation to happen. However, I'm not stopping at that. I got this code, the whole random noise code. I learned it from this website called, Nature of Code. Yeah, Nature of Code website. I think I put the link in the description. There, it was just a single color random noise thing, but I tried to change it. I tried to add my own flavor to it, and for that purpose, the first thing I did, you'll notice on the right side in the animation, is the color changes every 1/80% of a second. It changes every 80% of a second. So how am I doing that? So for that purpose, I'm using some variables which I'm showcasing on the video now. I have something called color switch, which is set to 5, and then I have another variable called FPS multiplier, which is set to 10. So why are those values 10 and 5? I believe I'm going to explain that by drawing it using the Paint software. So let's jump into that any second now. So once again, I'm doing a voiceover, so sometimes what I'm saying may not match exactly with the video. I'm so sorry about that. When I was recording, for whatever reason, maybe a loose cable or some kind of a software glitch, the voiceover got lost. So now I don't have a choice but to say everything I said already one more time as a voiceover. I guess this is how movie dubbing happens. Like in movies, they first do the shooting, and then they go to the recording room, and then they record the dialogues. It's pretty crazy. So there we go. We do have those two variables. And for some reason, I've set that value to 50. And I also have a variable called count of draw, which is like a counter. So there is something going on between the counter and so on. And there it is. This is the explanation I was talking about. So I know that P5.js is 60 frames per second. And I have a variable which is set to 5. Okay, and then I have a variable which is set to 10. So 10 into 5 is 50. And now you'll know that 10 seconds in P5.js is 600 frames, and 20 seconds in P5.js is 1200 frames. So my plan here is, what I'm trying to do, or rather what I have already done in this code, is every 50 frames. So that's 10. Multiplier is 10, and the color switch is 5. So 10 into 5. So that's going to be 50. Okay, and I'm using something called as a modulo operator there. So my idea is very simple. So I have 10 and then 5. 10 into 5 is 50. So every 50th frame. So 50th frame, 100th frame, 150th frame. So every 50th of a frame, I will change the color. That's what that code is all about. So I know that P5.js is 60 frames per second. So about 80% of a second, the color keeps changing. And for that, I use a random number function. So I don't know which color is going to come next. What I know is it will be a randomly generated color. And that is why when you look at the output, you'll notice that just before 1 second, like 80% of a second, the color changes. There it is. So it's not exactly 1 second the color changes. It changes 80% of a second and the color changes. So that's what those variables are all about. Color switch, and then multiplier, and then color switch FPS count, and of course you have the count of draw. Now, this is another important thing about P5.js. You must be able to manipulate. You must be able to understand frames and how to manipulate things based on frames, which is exactly what I'm doing. So I understood that P5.js has this frame counter, and I can use that to change my output behavior. So I wanted to make sure that the walker person changes color every 80% of a second, and I came up with that idea. And there it is. So now what I did was I disabled the whole counter thing. See, I have a variable called change color, and I set it to false, which means the color won't change. And this is how it looks. See, it's still pretty impressive. It's still Perlin noise. It's still a guy randomly walking all over the canvas, but it's not as pleasing to the eye. You know, I like it better when the colors are changing every so often. All right. So now every 50th, 100th, and 150th frame, the color is supposed to change, but because the flag, a Boolean value, is set to false, the color will not change. So now when I make it true again, let's wait for the animation. And there it is. We are back to status quo. The color changes every 50th frame. Now there is something we can do though. So right now the color is changing every 80% of a second. What if I want to change it? How can I make it maybe change a little bit slower? For example, I made the color switch into 6 and the multiplier into 20. So 20 multiplied by 6 is 120 frames. So that is 2 seconds. So now you'll see that the color will change every 2 seconds. There it is. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. There you go. So that's how, again, as I said, P5.js is all about understanding this whole frame counter thing, number of frames, and things like that. So I'm able to manipulate, play around with these two variables and decide how frequently, more or less frequently or more frequently, the color will change. Now I made it 6 4s are 6 4s are 24. That's 4 seconds. So look at that. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. There you go. Change. 1, 2, 3, 4. Change. 1, 2, 3, 4. There you go. Every 4 seconds the color is going to change because we have set the values to 6 and 40. So 6 into 40, that's 240 frames, which is 60 divided by, 240 divided by 60 is 4 seconds. So that is how I'm able to manipulate the color changes. So that's the reason for those extra variables. Now this wasn't in the original, book, but I was able to mix and match these things, just to make my code a little bit unique and pleasant looking. And now I'm talking about this variable called delayed start. So now again, remember, go back to the frame thing. So 300 is 6 5s are. So 6 into 5, 60 into 5 is 300. So what I'm saying is I want the animation to start after 5 seconds. And that is why whenever I reload the page, you'll notice that the animation, this canvas is blank for exactly 5 seconds. And then after 5 seconds, the animation starts. There you go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There it is. So that's what the delayed start is all about. It decides the delay before the animation starts. So as you can see, I have, 5. There you go. I want a 5-second delay, and each second is 60 frames. So that's where I got the value 300. So this is the main thing in P5.js. You don't have to be a math whiz or a physics whiz or a trigonometry or geometry whiz or something. Basic math is good enough for you to get reasonable results with your P5.js code. And just common sense, just basic common sense. Like for example, I made it -1, so that means the animation will start immediately. There is no delay at all. But I like it how it was before, a 5-second delay, so let's put it back to 5 seconds. So there you go. I think that's all there is to it. I think I have explained pretty much every line in the code. Once again, whoever is watching, I am, really sorry that I forgot to, I'm just showcasing, you don't need to be a math or a physics whiz. Yeah, that's why I'm showing that. So yeah, there you go. I'm really sorry I lost the recording on the original video. So I'm forced to do like a voiceover. It's not ideal. But again, I'm just learning how to shoot these videos and how to record them. I'm going to make a lot of mistakes. So there you go, folks. So hopefully this was useful to you as an introduction to P5.js coding, how it is set up, and also Perlin noise. And thank you. Thank you very much.